Welcome back now for the news in detail. The foreign ministers of Pakistan, China and Afghanistan are meeting in Islamabad for talks on the Afghan peace process. China's Wang Yi and Afghanistan's Salahuddin Rabbani will also discuss cooperation on security and counter-terrorism with their host, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. After the trilateral meeting, China's foreign minister will hold bilateral consultations with Pakistan's political leadership. Now, for more details, we're joined by our Islamabad correspondent, Isa Naqvi. Isa, the trilateral talks are taking place amid a decisive push for a peace deal between the United States and Taliban. So, Isa, how significant is the timing?
Yeah, definitely in a post-peace deal scenario in Afghanistan, as immediate neighbors of this war-trodden country, which is facing war for some decades now, as most immediate neighbors, Pakistan and China, have a pivotal role to play in Afghanistan. And this is exactly why this third round of trilateral talks between Afghanistan, Pakistan and China is taking place today in Islamabad. It is expected to start shortly, and the three foreign ministers are going to discuss cooperation in various fields. That includes security, that includes trading ties, economic ties, and in a possible peace deal scenario in Afghanistan, how Pakistan and China can play a role to ensure that peace and stability is there in Afghanistan.
Right, how China can play a role. So, Isa, what else do you expect to be discussed by the three foreign ministers?
Well, it's not just the security cooperation. Obviously, we are talking about a post-peace deal scenario here. So the three foreign ministers are going to discuss the possibilities that in future how these two countries can support Afghanistan come out of the war phase that it has gone through, and that also includes an offer that how Afghanistan can benefit from the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and how Pakistan and China can help build the economic and industrial infrastructure in Afghanistan. So all that is going to be part of the agenda of today's trilateral dialogue.
Right, Isa. Lastly, the Chinese foreign minister is expected to hold bilateral consultations with the Pakistani leaders. So what is on the agenda for that?
Munib, as we speak right now, I'm standing in front of the Foreign Office, and the bilateral meeting between Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China and Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, is underway at the moment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the two sides are discussing the wide-ranging bilateral relationship between Pakistan and China, and some MOUs regarding trade, economy and infrastructure and investment are going to be signed today. After this meeting, there would be the third round of trilateral dialogue, and then the Chinese foreign minister is going to hold meetings. He is going to call on the Prime Minister of Pakistan and also the military leadership.
Well, Isa Naqvi, thank you very much for your updates. Now, moving on, Iran says it has reactivated 20 nuclear centrifuges in its latest rollback of commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal. The centrifuges would boost Iran's production of enriched uranium. The chief of the Atomic Energy Organization, Behrouz Kamalvandi, says a chain of 164 advanced centrifuges will become operational by November. It says Iran has lifted the limitations on nuclear research and development adopted under the 2015 agreement. Kamalvandi says the measures have been taken in retaliation for the United States' withdrawal from the pact. But he says Iran could reserve the decision if all parties fulfilled their commitments to the deal. Meanwhile, India has failed in its attempt to become the first nation to explore the south pole of the moon. The Indian Space Research Organization says it lost contact with Chandrayaan-2 spacecraft as it attempted a soft landing. It says communications with the lander was lost 2.1 kilometers from the moon's surface. ISRO Chief K. Sivan says data is being analyzed to find out what went wrong. Chandrayaan-2 took off on July 22nd to probe the unexplored lunar South Pole. The South Pole is believed to contain some water because its craters are suspected of being unexposed to high temperatures. Only the United States, Russia and China have successfully attempted moon landings. Meanwhile, Switzerland's President Ueli Maurer will discuss the situation in occupied Kashmir with India's President Ramnath Kovind. They will be meeting in Bern on Friday. The Swiss Department of Foreign Affairs says the agenda for their summit also includes human rights. Switzerland last month renewed its warning to citizens, calling them to refrain from traveling to Indian-occupied Kashmir. Amid the mounting pressure on New Delhi, senior U.S. diplomat Alice Wells has said Washington supports a direct dialogue between Pakistan and India on Kashmir. Indian media rights organizations say Narendra Modi's government is silencing journalists in occupied Kashmir as part of the lockdown it imposed on August 5th. Their report, based on interviews with 70 media professionals in Indian-occupied Kashmir, says journalists are being subjected to harassment and arbitrary arrests. Media rights investigators observed intense surveillance and informal probes of journalists who published reports critical of the government. Meanwhile, Kashmiri activist Shana Rashid has described sedition charges brought against her as frivolous and politically motivated. Delhi police booked Rashid yesterday for criticizing India's human rights violations in occupied Kashmir on social media. Moving on, Israeli forces have shot dead 2 Palestinians during weekly protests on the Gaza border. 80 other protesters were injured. Israeli soldiers shot 2 teenage victims in the neck and stomach. Israeli forces have killed over 300 Palestinians and injured 18,000 others since the weekly protests began in March last year. The protests called for Israel to lift its blockade of Gaza and allow the return for Palestinian refugees to their ancestral homes. The court has sentenced the head of Turkey's main opposition party in Istanbul to 9 years and 8 months in prison over social media posts. Canan Kaftancıoğlu is accused of insulting President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and spreading terrorist propaganda. Kaftancıoğlu is the head of the Istanbul branch of the Secular Republic People's Party. She played a key role in the shock defeat of Erdogan's hand-picked mayoral candidate for Istanbul earlier this year. She said her trial is intended to punish the people. Kaftancıoğlu said the verdict will not silence her. Moving on to Hong Kong, where protesters plan another weekend of chaos after a night of police violence. The government has deployed security forces in the city as protesters aim to block the international airport today. Riot police are keeping a heavy presence at the key bus and rail terminals to prevent protesters getting to the airport. Hundreds of anti-government demonstrators demand an investigation into police violence during months of protests. Last night, police fired rubber bullets and used tear gas at demonstrators outside a subway station on the Kowloon Peninsula. The largest prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine since the 2014 separatists is underway. Ukrainian officials say 35 detainees from each side are being returned home. Russian state media says 2 buses carrying Ukrainian prisoners have arrived at Moscow's Vnukovo airport. Lawyers say the prisoners include filmmaker Oleg Sentsov and 24 Ukrainian Navy sailors detained off the Crimean coast last November. The Russian media says a Ukrainian aircraft is waiting to fly them home. It says a Russian plane is on standby at Kiev airport to bring home Russian prisoners. The U.S. government is considering further cuts to the annual cap on refugees for the year 2020. President Trump has significantly slashed the number of refugees allowed into the United States since assuming office in 2017. An official said the government has prioritized dealing with the movement of asylum seekers from Central American countries to the southern U.S. border. The administration also says it is more cost-effective to resettle refugees overseas rather than relocate people to the U.S. Meanwhile, an aid group says almost 30,000 overseas refugees have already completed interviews for resettlement. Last year, the administration kept the numbers at 30,000, down from 45,000 people in 2018. Hurricane Dorian has made landfall on the outer banks of North Carolina after hitting the islands with powerful winds and battering waves. Meanwhile, the death toll from Hurricane Dorian has climbed to 43 in the northern Bahamas, Abaco Islands. Since leaving the Bahamas, the slow-moving storm has now gained strength over the eastern U.S. seaboard. The National Hurricane Center said the storm made landfall at Cape Hatteras with maximum winds of 150 kilometers per hour. Dorian is currently battering the Carolinas, where coastal towns have been flooded. The hurricane has also whipped up tornadoes and cut power to hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of people are trapped amid rising floodwater. Now, the leaders of 7 countries home to the vast Amazon have signed a pact to protect the world's largest tropical rainforest. The presidents of Bolivia, Ecuador and Peru attended the one-day summit hosted by Colombia's president in the city of Leticia. Find out why in this report.
Forest fires in the Amazon have surged this year, destroying vast swathes of a vital bulwark against global climate change. The highest number of forest fires since 2010 are tearing through the Amazon, which is home to 1 million people. Critics have blamed Brazilian President Bolsonaro's policy of opening up more of the forest to agriculture and mining for the damage. Colombian President Ivan Duque has called on the region's leaders to work together to combat deforestation.
Here we are signing the agreement, an agreement where we coordinate and work harmoniously for common goals, a pact which obliges us, commits us, and motivates us to protect our Amazon.
The presidents were joined by indigenous leaders whose communities are the hardest hit by the Amazon forest fires. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno said it's time to take action without further delay.
Little remains for words. From this signature, we are going to fundamentally take actions because no theory is valid as long as it does not acquire earthiness and above all favors those who are most in need.
The 7 nations have agreed to put more time into education and to increase the role of the Amazon's indigenous communities.
Over 100 wildfires have been recorded in the Australian states of Queensland and New South Wales. The ferocious bushfires have destroyed at least 21 homes across 2 states on the country's east coast. Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, has endured over 65 bush and grass fires. Queensland State Premier Anastasia says she stands with grieving families.
We are in the process of trying to reach those families. We understand that they're all safe, but they will be going through a lot of grief at the moment, and I know that our community will pull together and definitely make sure that they get back on their feet.
Well, the unprecedented hot spring weather has created drought-like conditions in various parts of Australia. Now, moving on, a group of US states has launched an antitrust investigation into Facebook on suspicion of stifling competition and putting users at risk. New York State Attorney General Letitia James announced the action on behalf of 7 other states and districts of Columbia. The probe will determine whether Facebook endangered consumer data, reduced the quality of their choices, or increased the price of advertising. The Attorney General of Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Nebraska, North Carolina, and Ohio and Tennessee will join New York in the probe. The social media giant is already facing increasing antitrust scrutiny from the U.S. Congress and federal agencies. Texas, on behalf of the 40 other states, has launched a similar investigation against high-tech companies like Google. Southwest China is playing host to the annual Lifeline Rope Rescue Competition, an event all about the best way to rescue people on mountains. 30 teams from Germany, Belgium, Japan and South Korea are some of the teams taking part at Jinfo Mountain. More in this report.
Using lifeline ropes to save lives on the side of a mountain is a skill that comes in handy for seasoned climbers and mountaineers. This is where the lifeline rope rescue competition is especially useful. Beside being a competition chance for seasoned experts to pass their skills to less experienced rescuers, rope technology has been widely applied in rescues. It provides efficiency when faced with treacherous conditions and limited resources. Even though this is a competition, bitter rivalry isn't what it's about.
The result doesn't matter so much. We come here, learn from each other, and communicate together. And this is very important.
Although rope rescue started late in China, it has developed quickly, and these events provide a channel of communications between professionals from around the world. This will help improve the professionalism of rope rescue in China.
The gap between us and them mainly lies in experience and the application and management of technology, including the use of more advanced equipment such as helicopters. Many foreign rescue teams use helicopters and ropes together, which is very efficient.
Jinfo Mountain has been the site of these friendly, non-rescue rescues for the past 2 years.
In Belgium, the country's love for pigeon racing has brought fame to breeder and trainer Joël Vescout. Her starbird, Armando, has made headlines for being the fastest international racer. Armando is a highly sought-after bird following his recent win at the recent Racing Birds Championship League in Europe. You can meet Armando in this report.
Meet Armando. He is an expert at dodging power cables and airborne predators. He has a string of remarkable wins to his name. Armando is an elite racing pigeon. His DNA became highly sought after by international breeders and trainers following his recent win at the Champions League for Europe's best birds in Poland. The feathered flyer brought trainer and breeder Joël Vescout €1.25 million from Chinese buyers through an online auction. Standing in his garden in Ingelmunster, Belgium, Vescout still remembers his bird's incredible record-setting auction, which he credits to Armando's intelligence.
It's not bigger or stronger than any other pigeons, but Armando is very smart, and you can see it through its results in competitions.
Joël Vescout could have settled down to a comfortable life after he sold the world's most expensive racing bird, but inheriting the tradition from his father, for the 64-year-old Joël, pigeon breeding is a hobby turned international business he plans to continue. Dedicating 10 hours a day to his 300 birds, Joël is now preparing his beloved Armando's heirs for future races.
You can see the pigeon is healthy if the eyes are very light. If the beak is very white, a gray beak is not good, and wings must be flexible, very flexible. That's how a good pigeon is.
Breeders in Belgium have many approaches to pigeon racing. Some incorporate new methods of breeding. The country has almost 20,000 licensed breeders, something that makes this industry a strong one.
Johnny Michel sang about paving paradise for a parking lot, and a Swiss artist has set up a forest in a football stadium. This suggests that one day nature might only be enjoyed in a zoo-like environment. An artificial forest setup of around 300 trees in Klagenfurt Stadium in southern Austria is part of a climate change campaign. During the past century, human activities have released large amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The tree exhibition will be held to encourage more tree planting and highlight the risks posed by global warming.
For some, this will be of a highly symbolic character or of a philosophical character, like the tree of life or the place of longing. Because of the current situation, this represents a memorial as a part of the climate change discussion.
While climate change has recently become a pressing political issue in much of the world, the idea for the exhibition is not new. It was first drawn by Austrian artist Max Pentner almost 30 years ago, and the image is shown in the stadium.
Der eben 1970 wirklich
It goes back to the drawing which we project here by Max Pentner, who in 1970 had the vision that one day that what we have been doing for decades at zoos with endangered animals could happen to nature.
schon machen.
Littman also said if everybody can take a stand and try to end global warming, this world would be a safer place to live in. The exhibition will run till October 27th and it opens on Monday, 8th of September. Well, in the business stories, Japan has rejected South Korea's offer to extend a military intelligence sharing pact in exchange for the easing of Japanese trade controls. Officials in Tokyo said the government would not condone bartering trade controls for security cooperation. The 2016 intelligence sharing accord is set to expire in November after South Korea withdrew last month. Seoul pulled out after Tokyo imposed controls on its exports of materials used to manufacture semiconductors and display panels. China's tech giant Huawei has launched the world's first 5G chipset at a trade show in Berlin. The Kirin 990 is the smallest 5G mobile phone chip with lower power consumption. Vice President Ai Weiwei says Huawei has worked on the chip for the last 2 years. The VP says the chip integrates a number of new technological innovations, so the total number of transistors exceeds 10 billion. Huawei's flagship phone, equipped with the Kirin 990 series, will be released later this month. Now, in tennis, world number 2 Rafael Nadal and Russia's Daniil Medvedev have reached the US Open final in New York. Nadal wore down Italy's Matteo Berrettini, while Medvedev overcame Bulgaria's Grigor Dimitrov in their respective semi-final. Spaniard Nadal defended 2 set points in the opener before regaining his rhythm to beat Berrettini 7-6, 6-4 and 6-1. It is the 4th men's US Open final in Nadal's career. In the other semi-final, 5th seed Daniil Medvedev of Russia eased past Bulgaria's Grigor Dimitrov 7-6, 6-4 and 6-3. He served up 10 service aces while he wrapped up the match in 2.5 hours. Medvedev and Nadal will meet in the final on Sunday. Leg spin maestro Abdul Qadir has died of a cardiac arrest in Lahore. He was 63. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan paid condolences, saying Qadir was one of the greatest leg spinners of all time. Cricket greats Shane Warne and Wasim Akram paid tribute to the legend and said he will never be forgotten. Qadir took 236 wickets in 67 tests and claimed 132 scalps in 104 one-day internationals matches for Pakistan. He represented Pakistan in 2 World Cups and briefly led the team. After retirement, Qadir became a chief selector at the Pakistan Cricket Board. Now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, with the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, stay tuned with Indus News.